My sister tried to ruin my career and said, "It's for your own good." So I became her biggest competitor and stole every client she ever had. I don't know what I expected when I agreed to meet Ria for coffee that cold December morning. I remember watching her text pop up on my phone, the screen lighting up with a simple coffee. Need to talk. No frills, no emojis, no punctuation other than that final period, which seemed strange even for her. Ria's texts were usually laced with exclamations or at least a ha-ha here and there. But we were family, and I trusted her. So, I tossed on my coat and walked to the little coffee shop we'd been meeting at since college, feeling some kind of nostalgia in the way the winter wind whipped through the streets of Chicago. I got there first, ordered our usual latte with an extra shot for her, chai tea for me, and waited. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Just as I was about to text her, she walked in, scanning the room with that laser-focused look she gets when she's mid-presentation. She spotted me, flashed a brief smile, and dropped into the seat across from me, her designer coat brushing the floor as she settled in. "Hey," I said, offering her latte. "Been a minute." She took a sip, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Yeah. Thanks. I had a lot going on." "You and me both," I chuckled, expecting her to dive into one of our usual back and forths about clients, work horror stories, or the latest marketing trends. But she didn't bite. Instead, she set her cup down and gave me this piercing look. "I have to tell you something, Claire. And I'd rather you hear it from me than through the grapevine." A little shiver went up my spine, but I forced a smile. "All right. Go ahead." Ria glanced around, as if ensuring no one was listening, even though the coffee shop was half empty. "Look," she began, her tone shifting into something I could only describe as cautious. "You know how we're both up for the Apex Consulting contract?" Of course, I knew. Apex Consulting was the kind of client that could change your career trajectory entirely. The agency that landed them would practically double their revenue overnight. Both Ria and I had been gunning for it for months. But that was fine, it was just work, friendly competition, or so I thought. "Yeah, of course," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. "I mean, it's a big fish, but I figured we'd both give it our best and see what happens." "Right," she murmured, her eyes flicking up to meet mine. "Except it's not as simple as that, Claire." Now my stomach was doing little flips. "What do you mean?" She took another sip of her latte, holding my gaze over the rim of her cup. Well, let's just say I know a few people over at Apex. I might have suggested that taking you on wouldn't be in their best interests." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, waiting for her to say it was some twisted joke. But she didn't blink. "You did what?" Her mouth twisted slightly, but her voice was as cool as ever. "Claire, I know how much you want this, but honestly, this is out of your league. Apex needs experience, someone who knows the ins and outs. I've been doing this 5 years longer than you." I scoffed, crossing my arms. "Are you serious right now? Ria, we're sisters. You went behind my back?" "I wouldn't put it like that," she replied calmly. "It's just. They asked for my advice, and I gave it." "Asked for your advice?" I snapped, feeling my cheeks flush. "Ria, this isn't some little project. This could make or break my career. Do you realize what you've done?" "Claire, listen." Her voice had that familiar, patronizing tone. "I'm doing you a favor. You're not ready. Apex would eat you alive. You don't have the client base or the resources, and if you'd been honest with yourself, you'd know that." My mouth was dry. I could barely find my voice. "So what, you're just doing this for my own good?" "Yes," she said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "You're too emotionally invested in these things. You don't have the right boundaries." "Boundaries?" I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "You're talking about boundaries? You just sabotaged your own sister to land a client." Her jaw tightened. "Look, Claire, I have goals too. I've worked hard for everything I have. I'm not going to let anyone, family or not, get in the way of that. You need to grow up and learn that this is how the real world works." I stared at her, trying to reconcile the Ria I thought I knew with the stranger sitting across from me. Part of me wanted to scream, to storm out. But instead, I clenched my fists, took a deep breath, and let her words sink in. "Fine," I said finally, my voice barely a whisper. "If that's how you want to play it. Fine. Game on." For the next few weeks, I threw myself into work with a fire I hadn't felt before. I started reaching out to old contacts, networking like my life depended on it. I knew Ria was good, but if she thought I was going to just sit back and let her bulldoze my career, she was in for a shock. I went after every potential client I could, pulling late nights and early mornings, studying Apex's portfolio, strategizing until my head spun. And then, one evening, after a long day of pitches, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Is this Claire Bennett?" a deep voice asked. "Speaking," I said, my heart pounding as I recognized the name on the ID, Apex Consulting. "Hi, Claire. I'm Sean Miller, VP of Marketing at Apex. I got your proposal. And let's just say I'm intrigued. Would you be interested in meeting with us next week? I almost dropped my phone. I stammered out a yes, absolutely. And quickly noted down the details, my hand shaking. This was it, the big break. And I had Rhea to thank, in a twisted sort of way. Her betrayal had lit a fire under me, and now I was inches away from taking her down at her own game. The meeting was surreal. I walked into Apex's sleek, modern office, feeling both exhilarated and terrified. Sean was courteous but sharp, asking detailed questions that tested every ounce of my knowledge and skill. But I held my ground, laying out a vision that even surprised me. I could see him nodding, his eyes narrowing in that assessing way that meant he was taking me seriously. Finally, as we shook hands, he smiled. "Claire, I think you're exactly what we're looking for. We'll be in touch soon." I managed a polite thank you before practically sprinting out of the building. When I was finally outside, I let out a small, incredulous laugh. I'd done it. I'd landed Apex. When the news hit that I'd secured the contract, Rhea's reaction was swift. She called me that evening, her voice icy. "Claire, I can't believe you went after Apex," she began, skipping right over hello. "Oh, so it's different when I do it?" I shot back. "Funny, I thought we were just playing by your rules, Rhea." "Don't get smug," she warned. "You barely scraped by on that contract. You won't be able to keep it." "Try me," I replied, my voice steady. "Because from now on, every client you have is fair game. If you want to sabotage me, fine. Just know that I'm coming for you too. And I don't think you're ready for what I'm capable of." The rivalry between us became the stuff of office legend. Clients who'd been loyal to Rhea for years started approaching me, curious about the new fire they sensed in my pitches. I could see the confusion on her face every time we crossed paths at networking events, her usually smug smile replaced by a simmering glare. But I didn't care. I had a job to do, and if that meant outshining her, so be it. Over the next year, I took every opportunity to build my reputation, seizing clients with the same ruthless focus Rhea had shown me, and by the end of it, I'd surpassed her, not just in numbers but in respect. The strange thing is, it wasn't the victory I thought it'd be. One day, as I looked at my full calendar and endless client list, I realized something. I had become like her in ways I never wanted. And maybe that's what I needed to see all along. When I saw Rhea at our family's Thanksgiving dinner later that year, she gave me a look I hadn't seen in years, a quiet, grudging respect. We didn't speak much that evening, but for the first time, I felt like we understood each other. Maybe in her own twisted way, Rhea had done me a favor. But I'd found my own way to success, one that didn't need her rules. And that was enough. The tension between Rhea and me didn't fade entirely, but after Thanksgiving, we fell into a kind of mutual, simmering truce. We avoided each other's direct path, focusing on our own careers and clients. It was a fragile peace, but it kept things from getting explosive. Until I found out what she'd done next. It started with a casual lunch with one of my clients, Alan Grant. He'd been loyal to my agency ever since I'd landed Apex. I was in the middle of explaining a new campaign idea when he leaned forward, clearing his throat. "Listen, Claire, I'm gonna be straight with you," he said, looking around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "I got a call from your sister last week." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "Rhea?" "Yeah." He lowered his voice. "She pitched her agency to me, claiming they'd offer more specialized services than you could. Said you were getting overloaded." My blood ran cold. Rhea was back to her games, and now she was going after my biggest clients, subtly painting me as too overwhelmed to handle the workload. It was a classic Rhea move, subtle, undermining, and vicious. Alan reached out and put a hand over mine. "I told her I'm loyal to you, Claire. I know what you've done for my brand. But I thought you should know. She's out there, and she's coming for blood." I forced a smile, but my mind was already racing. "Thanks for letting me know, Alan. Really? I appreciate the heads up." But inside, I was furious. I'd spent years rebuilding my career after her betrayal, only to have her clawing at my clients now that I'd achieved some real success. I was done playing defense. If Rhea wanted a war, she'd get one. But this time, I'd be the one writing the rules. That evening, I sat down in my apartment, my fingers tapping against my laptop as I considered my next move. Rhea had always been so calculating, manipulating situations to her advantage, never getting her hands dirty directly. If I wanted to get back at her, I needed to find a way to disrupt her entire operation. Something she'd never see coming. Then it hit me. I didn't need to sabotage her clients or steal her contracts, I needed to go for her credibility. Rhea's reputation was everything to her. She'd built a brand around being the closer, the expert, the visionary who always had the perfect answer. But I knew the truth. Beneath that polished exterior, Rhea cut corners. She loved to talk a big game but often relied on half-baked research, making sweeping promises she couldn't keep. I'd seen it up close in the early days of her career, but I'd let it slide because, back then, she was my sister. Now, it was her Achilles heel. Over the next few weeks, I worked on a plan that was as quiet as it was precise. I started digging through her client history, connecting with former clients of hers who'd left her agency dissatisfied. I invited them to my office, listened to their complaints, and took careful notes. Each story painted the same picture. Rhea had promised the moon but delivered far less. I even heard from a few clients she'd outright neglected in favor of more lucrative ones, leaving them with sloppy campaigns and broken promises. One by one, I compiled testimonials, emails, documentation, all the proof I needed that her perfect track record was far from spotless. And then, I did what Rhea would never expect. I started circulating whispers in the industry, connecting her most vocal former clients with key players at major agencies. I didn't have to say much, just a hint that Rhea's work ethic was inconsistent, that she'd overpromised and underdelivered. Word spread like wildfire. In marketing, reputation is currency, and Rhea's was starting to dwindle. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected call from Apex. I picked up, trying to keep my voice casual. "Claire, this is Sean Miller. I need to ask if you're free for coffee next week." "Of course, Sean. What's this about?" There was a pause, then he said, "I've been hearing things about Rhea. And, well, let's just say that I might have a new project in mind, but I need someone I can trust. Someone who's proven themselves." A smirk tugged at my lips. "I'd love to help." Our coffee meeting led to an even bigger contract with Apex, a project Rhea had been preparing for months. I knew that once the news got back to her, it would be devastating. I could picture her reaction, the tension in her jaw, the way she'd clench her fists, trying to understand how she'd lost yet another chance. She'd never know how carefully I'd orchestrated it all, how the foundations of her empire had quietly crumbled beneath her feet. 2 days after the contract was officially signed, I got a call from Rhea. I stared at my phone for a moment before answering, curiosity and anticipation prickling my skin. "Hello? Claire," she began, her voice tight. "You took Apex?" "Yes, I did," I replied, keeping my tone even. "Funny how things work out, huh?" She was silent for a moment, and I could practically hear her grinding her teeth. "What did you do?" "Me?" I laughed, playing innocent. "Rhea, I've just been doing my job. Maybe you should focus on doing yours, instead of spreading rumors about me being overloaded." "I'm just telling the truth," she snapped. "Funny," I replied, a slight edge creeping into my voice. "I'm just doing the same. Like how you overpromise and underdeliver? Maybe clients deserve to know who they're hiring." There was a long pause, and I could feel her shock through the phone. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. You set me up?" I let a smirk show through in my voice. "Not a setup, Rhea. Just making sure the truth comes out. Isn't that what you wanted?" Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. In the end, she had nothing to say. She hung up without another word, and I knew I'd hit the mark. Over the next few months, Rhea's agency faltered. Clients started drifting away, one after another, drawn to agencies with reputations untainted by scandal and broken promises. And as Rhea's world unraveled, I felt a strange calm settle over me. It wasn't euphoria or triumph, but something quieter, closure. When I looked at my own thriving agency, my loyal clients, and the stability I'd built, I felt something else too, pride. I'd forged my own path, survived her betrayal, and risen above it without needing to destroy anyone. Well, not entirely. The next Thanksgiving, Rhea sat across the table from me again, her face drawn and her once confident smile faded. She looked at me with a wary expression, as if assessing a new, dangerous opponent. "So, how's work going, Claire?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. I took a sip of wine, a slight smile on my lips. "Couldn't be better. Clients are loyal. Business is growing. I couldn't ask for more." She nodded, but I could see the glint of defeat in her eyes. It was over, and she knew it. Our rivalry had finally burned out, but this time, I was the one left standing. As dinner continued, I felt something unexpected, a strange sense of forgiveness. I realized that Rhea had taught me to be stronger, to demand more respect, and to never let anyone undermine my potential. She might have tried to ruin me, but in the end, I'd outgrown her need to control. I had my own power now, and it wasn't built on tearing others down. Leaving Thanksgiving that night, I looked back at her one last time and saw a faint look of respect in her eyes. Maybe, in some twisted way, Rhea had finally come to understand that I was her equal, or even her better. Walking away, I felt lighter than I had in years. I'd gotten my revenge, but I'd also found something more valuable, the confidence to stand on my own terms. And for the first time, I was free from her shadow, ready to take on the world without her holding me back. And that was the most satisfying ending of all.